September 23, 2014. We start with a announcement that the meeting is being recorded, and also with a moment of appreciation for our servicemen and women serving in Afghanistan. Thank you. We're going to have an executive session at the end of the meeting for the purpose of discussing state hospital negotiations. The first item at 7 o'clock is Director Jim Schneider, Director of Parks and Recs, and we're wanting to recognize Jim for his 16 years of service. He's resigning as of the end of the month, so it's a happy time and a sad time for us and for, well, hopefully for him. He's been with us for 16 years. We've sure appreciated everything. We've got a certificate for you that just sort of documents our appreciation for everything you've done for the town.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.
We have some,
I just have a couple of things. I'd
thanks
just
for
like to
bringing
say.
those kids.
What's that?
It looks like you brought your kids.
I did.
Thank
yeah.
you so much for that.
Madison and Bennett are joining me tonight.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you,
We
guys.
appreciate having you here.
I just wanted to throw out a couple of words just to say, really, the department couldn't be as successful as it is without acknowledging some of the amazing, present and former full-time and seasonal staff that we've had. I've worked with many employees over the years, and that's contributed to the success of the department. Most recently, and specifically, I want to thank Brian Schools, equipment operator and landscaper, and Coyote Lewis, program coordinator and interim director of the department, for their unwavering dedication to the Parks and Recreation Department, Commission, and the community at large. They've helped build a solid foundation for the department and will be instrumental in achieving the goal of building a new recreation center and expanding the newly acquired state hospital property. I would also like to thank Mike Sullivan, town administrator, and all the town departments for their guidance, assistance, and support over the years. Many thanks to the selectmen and all those who serve on volunteer commissions and committees, from town government to youth sports, for their commitment to keeping the town running smoothly while adding to the value of the community. I also want to thank my Parks and Recreation commissioners for supporting my family and I over the years and providing the leadership needed to keep the department moving forward. Lastly, I want to thank the residents of Medfield for their ongoing support of the department, whether they're participating in their favorite program or relaxing in one of our parks. Their ability to make recommendations and to vote to support Parks and Recreation will certainly keep Medfield a wonderful place to live. So, with that, I really, want to thank everybody for, really amazing 16 years. I've enjoyed working here tremendously, and, I'm sad to leave, but I'm looking forward to this new opportunity to move on. So thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
Before you go, Jim. I just want to add, as someone that was elected to the Park and Recreation Commission a number of years ago, I've just noticed a tremendous change in the past 16 years of the professionalism that you've brought to the Park and Recreation Commission. The increase in the number of programs that the kids run, just your availability to other town boards, your willingness to just to help has made a huge difference of what used to be kind of a part-time organization that was going along as best as they could. You've turned it into a professional organization, and you leave now it in incredibly good hands. And I think it's a motto of this community of how well the youth activities in particular are run under the Park and Recreation Commission. The other thing is the quality of the fields. We always had problems with those fields. You've managed to let them in fallow and alternate them and keep them so they're in incredibly good condition. So we indeed are going to miss you big time, and you do leave us in very good shape, and we appreciate that very much. And personally, just wish you good luck in the Framingham.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just mentioned, Jim, that one of my prized T-shirts is my kinder soccer coach T-shirt that I got about 10, 11 years ago from you. Thank you for that.
Mel Siebold, Chairman of the Park and Rec. Selectman DeSorga stole most of our thunder. Basically, we meet tomorrow night as a full board. I've actually been the only board member that's been privy to Jim's resignation. Initially, I have contacted the rest of the board, and I've told him I was coming tonight and in support of Jim. He has taken our program. I've been here for half of his 16-year tenure and have seen a tremendous increase in programming, and Jim's been able to do more with less. Our budget's been cut probably for the past 5 or 6 years. We've been able to increase revenues because of that programming, which has allowed us to hire an inordinate number of Medfield teens over the summers for our Park and Rec summer programs. Medfield Park and Rec loss is Framingham's gain, so I just wish him the best of luck from the commission and the town.
Thanks, Mel.
Good night. My name is Coyote Lewis. I serve as the current program coordinator, soon to be interim director of Parks and Recreation. And I want to take this opportunity just to thank you, Jim, for your guidance and your leadership and your commitment. I've only been here almost a year, and I really thank you for giving me that creative space in order to work and serve this community. So we really, really appreciate it.
I'm Brian Schools, equipment operator slash landscaper. I wouldn't be here without Jim right now. He opened everything up to taking all the maintenance in-house, which was the best thing for Park and Rec, and ever since then it's been smooth sailing with his direction, and I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done. We have a little plaque for your appreciation.
And it says, in appreciation to James Snyder, CPRP, honoring 16 years of service, commitment, and leadership as director of the Medfield Parks and Recreation Department. So thank you, Jim.
I'd just like to say that in the 16 years I've worked with Jim, it's been a pleasure. He was very responsive when we needed to cut the budgets. He cut the budgets. When we needed to expand the program opportunities, he was right there adding toddler programs and summer camps. He turned around the swim pond. I remember when people wouldn't be caught dead at the swim pond, and now it's turned into a real asset for the town, and in part due to his diligence in cleaning it up and getting the Public Works Department in there every year to pump it out and redo it. I think he's also, as he mentioned, made a huge difference in terms of quality of the fields. He's left a good staff. He's got a top-notch person handling the maintenance of the grounds, and he's got a good new exciting guy to come in and take over as program director and acting coordinator. So I think while we hate to see you go, now that we finally got you trained, you're leaving us. But I think you're leaving us in good hands, and I wish you well in your new job, and I am sure we're going to be hearing great things about you in future years. So best of luck to you, and I would hope you might introduce your children so we could meet them.
This is my daughter Madison and my son Bennett.
Excellent.
Just, obviously a very special part of my life, and, again, I thank everybody here for just being supportive of me and my family over the years. It's really meant a lot to me and a lot to my family, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Good luck in Framingham. Next, we're meeting with Superintendent Ken Feeney, hi Ken, and the Cemetery Commissioners to discuss cemetery regulations. We'll hear from Tom Sweeney, Cemetery Commissioner.
Good evening to everybody at home and here at the Selectmen's meeting. The commission met this morning, Cemetery Commission, with Ken and some representatives of, especially the representative Bill Wilson from the Watertown Cremation Services. That's one of the things that we were asked to investigate. We went through it. Bill gave us some good ideas, and you're going to find out, I think, I thought they'd have the budget here tonight, but they don't. But we had estimated that we'd like the town to purchase a CREP, which is, I believe, 36 spaces, and to mount it, in the area down by the pond, the lake, in the, will be somehow, we don't know how it's gonna fit there. It's all, the Ken's crew are gonna take care of some landscaping down there. Landscaping, we're gonna have to remove some trees due to the granite down there. This is somehow, it's gonna mound up on the granite. It'll be very pretty if it's done right. And I think it's gonna be done right. Ken and the fellows today talked about it. And that would be the start of the cremation area in the cemetery, the formal cremation center of in the cemetery. There are other areas that we've had in the past, small gardens that are identified, and they've been identified, but I think they should be identified even more so. But that's another project that's going to follow in the future. The next thing we talked about was you said talk about the dogs. Well, we talked about dogs this morning and came to the conclusion that we should have forcible regulations with fines. The fines will represent, for the first encounter, I call them, $50. The second time the person's found with dogs in the cemetery, I say cemetery, that means the whole cemetery. And that means that's $100. We haven't, if that doesn't deter it, you're gonna have to deal with it, because you're gonna have to enforce it. We're not gonna enforce it. We're just making the recommendations and letting the selectmen go from there for the enforcement.
Tom, you want to keep the dogs out of the cemetery entirely, is
That's
what you're
right.
saying.
Well, we're seeing more damage down there, and I talked to the boys down there, the men, I should say, because they are. And we had a long discussion on this today, and, you know, it's not safe for them with the dogs there. Not only, you know, attacks about this, but health-wise. You see the cloud of dust, and what that is that's the dogs. I mean, it dries out, and they have to drive through it. And it's not only in the middle of the cemetery, it's along the side of the cemetery. Someone won't take a bag with them. They'll leave it on the side. And that dries out, dust, and that's disease. And I think that that's something that really will start something, because the only way we can see that this being enforced, or the whole cemetery security, would be to fence it. And that's going to be up to the selectmen. That's a future thing. We've talked about this for years now, and that's what we would recommend. That's what the fellow said. Hey, we actually want to have a gate, Main Street gate, closed from whatever hour the guys leave there until when they come in the morning, because we're finding that's a shortcut through to Main Street, or from Main Street through to Dale Street. And a lot of people, and I mean, they don't go slow either. I went through there, and this gentleman in an SUV, he was hitting 40 miles an hour in there. I mean, he was really moving out, it seemed to me. So I go through with an SUV, and I wouldn't dare hit that speed, but he was, he or she, I'm not saying it was, but I think that should be something that, here again, enforcement, that's up to you and the chief. The chief could, you know, set somebody up in the morning. I don't know, that's after school buses too. There's no regular time, it's when or before school buses in a lot of cases too, because that's when it backs up on Main Street. And backs up on Dale Street too, so at least you got one entrance closed, and they've got only the exit, so they're not gonna go through all the way through.
Tommy, there's signs up there now that say no dogs. So you're calling for new
We're
signs?
gonna, new
that would
signs,
have with the
new
re-
signs, right,
the
new signs that
recommended-
says no dogs.
And it would have the recommended fines as well? put
You've
on
got
that?
it, that's up to you guys, you gotta post them. We're suggesting that you get this underway now, and we would like to see it done by no later than December, I'd say 31st. And that gives plenty of notice, because Tim and the other fellow up there, then they said that they would be telling people up there that have dogs to be prepared to not to bring the dogs in there anymore. It's the only way we can do it. I don't know the other way. If you've got suggestions, then you're going to do it. The expansion, we talked about expansion. That's another thing we've talked about too. There's got to be some way of paying for this cremation monument. And someone said that they'd like to see the monies come out of the expansion. Okay, I would like to see it come out of some kind of a revenue that's reserve fund somewhere. We could take it out of the expansion, but then pay off the rest of it with the reserve funds. You could do it that way, so you don't touch your expansion funds. In the first one, we're talking less than, I think it's around, I believe it was like $14,000. Was that the figure, Christine, that they gave you? Did they give you that figure? Yeah, around 14 to 15,000. So, but you're not going to touch the expansion funds and somehow get the difference out of that type of thing.
I'm just confused a little bit, Tom. We have an expansion fund
Townwide, you got one.
for just the cemetery?
No, townwide, everybody dips into it.
So there's
When-
nothing specifically for the cemetery?
No, unexpended funds go into that fund. It's like the free cash, it's not free cash. But they dig out of that to go into free cash, so they could do it this way here. That's up to you guys, that's what we're suggesting.
Could we get a little unexpended funds 101 for those of us who don't know?
There's a couple of things you might be alluding to. One is the stabilization fund that we put money into that can be used for capital projects. We also have the capital budget where the different departments submit their requests.
We fund that every year, and that's designated for particular things.
Yes, it seems to me, though, the logical one, Tom, and I think there's probably a pretty good chunk of money in that. When a cemetery plot is sold, 50% of the money is appropriated to the Cemetery Perpetual Care Trust Fund, and the other 50% goes into something called the Sale of Lots Fund. And that is the money that can be used for cemetery expansion. The perpetual care money can only be used for the maintenance of the cemetery.
Yep.
The sale of lots funds can be used for the maintenance and also the expansion of the cemetery if you wanted to buy new land.
Yeah.
If you wanted to develop
Yeah.
within the additional cemetery, additional grave sites.
Sure. Okay.
You can use that money. I checked with the town accountant today, and that money, I know it was being set aside for a number of years to develop the portion of the cemetery that goes down to Bridge Street.
That's what we're
Downhill.
talking about, expansion, right?
Yeah, downhill.
And
Yeah.
the balance in that fund as of the end of last year was $344,000. So I think that should be probably sufficient to do a lot of the things that
To get going down the
you're
hill.
looking
Yeah.
into.
The other request is going to be going in from the cemetery guys down there. Tim was taking an audit of graves left to be, for existing graves,
Sure,
sites
yeah.
that have been already out there.
Yeah.
And he's going to request the right-hand side before you down the hill in the back going towards the
Yeah.
river,
Yep.
that little area there to be blocked off, set up for expansion.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be money from this particular account too.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we're thinking ahead to keep this thing going because he's afraid there are lots that are there that have vacant plots.
Yep.
And we just can't identify them. So he says the best way to do it is to deal with the whole and go with the expansion and then work that other one out eventually in the future.
That's the land that runs down to Bridge Street?
That's right, correct.
Is there a ballpark, how many years left we have until the cemetery's filled?
It's pretty high. He said somewhere without expansion, 33, I think it was.
33 years?
Yeah. I think it was something like that. But that's not say, accounting for, we have burials that come in from out of town, they have own lots there, here the cremations and so
Mhm.
on. And that's becoming more and more popular with a lot of people of all faiths.
Do you think, in light of that, I think, Ken, did you say 40% of the burials now are cremations, cremated remains?
I made that comment at the commission meeting this morning, 33%.
33, okay,
Tim, who runs the cemetery, thinks it's a little bit higher.
they're higher. I'm wondering if what you talked about earlier is going to be big enough, 36? That probably.
Well, we
only-
thought that would be, we talked to the, cost-wise,
Yeah.
cost would be.
Size-wise,
Yeah, size-wise, the 36.
yeah.
But within the 36, each little area, they call them, we can have four vessels in
Urns
there.
in there? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's all, but then this is another thing too. that we talked about goes in a little deeper, but that's okay if everybody brings the same size
Whatever.
urn,
Yeah.
okay? But if somebody walks in with grandma's urn, whether it's up to here, we're in
Yeah.
trouble, and they don't have a lot there.
Yeah.
So then you've got to deal with the lots again. So we thought that, try to keep everything plain vanilla, because this is what they talked about with the granite too, because you start changing colors in granite and this and that, it gets more expensive. Anything you go beyond that 14, that's base price. And that's with the town providing their services for setting the base up there with on the top of the granite,
Yeah.
the whole thing. So that's why we thought the least expensive, and find out how much interest there is out there.
Yeah.
Before we got through the meeting, Timmy said to us, he had already 3 people asking us about it. We don't have any hard costs, all we got is estimates. So there is interest out there. So there's 4 times 4, there's 16 units right there.
Mhm.
So people want it. That's what we want to find out by the 36th. The cost, if you stay with the same 36, does not change, other than the cost of transportation and the cost of the granite.
So
That's
probably those 36 will fill up right away.
We don't know. It all depends.
Yeah.
That's how he put it that way there. He says that's the 2 variables. They've got to take the granite down. It's all Vermont granite too.
I wonder if there'd be an economy of scale by building maybe 3 or 4 of those units. It might reduce your cost. By building 3 or 4, multiples of the 36 units.
Be the same, right now would be the same cost. The 14,000 for each additional. So that's why he said that, we wanted to stay there. He says, when you deviate from that because of the size of the granite, when they start cutting, that gets into price cost. And when you start color, that's the things that, also when you start to mark the granite. So we've got to find some kind of a vanilla type thing that everybody can get into, because we got to into with the veterans too. Because someone said, if I want to put a veteran, a flag on there, there are little hooks that they put on there
Yeah.
that can take a flag, but the flag has got to be standard flag too, because you've got only 12 inches, I think, between. And there's like a 4-inch between units.
Yes.
So you have to, and then if somebody wanted to put a flower or something like that, or a religious emblem, you could do that, but that's got to be all standard.
It's a lot of information. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other questions, let us know.
Well, can I just give you a couple thoughts? One is that I'm concerned when I hear that we only have 33 years' worth of spaces left. I guess I would ask you guys to maybe come up with a plan of what happens at the end of 33 years. I think we need to be thinking about that right now. And so maybe in the next year or something, you could come back to the selectmen with a plan as to what happens next when the 33 years is up.
Yeah, I'll be here 33 years.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing, Tom. And the other thing is that if you're thinking about doing these crypt, I think that they're going to fill up a lot faster. And I'm thinking, like Mike seems to be thinking, and I hope that when you plan them, that you plan for expansion, so that how it's going to look with a series of them.
That's why the landscaping, we talked to Bobby, we talked to Ken about this. That can be done. It's a matter of taking down some landscaping in there now. The granite is beautiful there that would sit on, and it's going to sit on so that it's going to face the pond. It's going to be something that, when we talked to some of the veterans about flags putting, within that area or whatever it is, but there's plenty of room for people to put input for gardens, the whole bit. So the biggest cost for the town's going to be is the granite that's there.
Yeah.
And how it's done, because you've got to, he impressed on us too, if you're going to do it, he says, I can do it, and I know, and that's not going to move, he says, once I do it. But if you guys do it, I can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
That it won't move.
But the final cost of it is 14,000?
That's what we had.
Yeah, that's.
I believe that was it, and that was the foundation
Seems so much.
by him, right?
Foundation by,
By foundation by you guys, that's, excuse
And then
me.
he provides and he installs the units. Yeah.
then there's the decorative
Yeah.
granite, and then there's the.
But if it goes,
Oh,
example, if it goes like this, 2 years from now, or 10 years from now, it's on us, not him.
Yeah.
And he was very specific about that, and that's the same when you deviate in colors, and when you start putting different etchings on the doors. The same thing, so.
Might not be in business 10 years from now anyway.
Well, this guy here has been in business since 19, I forget what it is, 18 something. They were the original granite, they were in Quincy, granite, they were in, I believe, in North Shore, Saugus, Watertown. They started in Watertown, that's where all the granite was made. And then Quincy, the quarries. So they followed the quarries. They bought every one of these companies. Only one company that they bought, unfortunately, they used out-of-country granite. And the doors did discolor or crack. There were, I forget how many there were, 177 doors. He said, at our expense, we changed the doors. And he says, we will not use any out-of-country granite doors or any granite, period. He says it's not, he says it's all Vermont, and the farthest they will go is Canada.
Tom, would you mind standing? Are you okay to stay there for a second? Because I think we're going to have some questions about dogs.
My name is Sean Collins, and I live at 9 Baker Road. I was just listening to your report, Mr. Sweeney. I just want to have a general understanding of the process by which a proposed cemetery commission regulation gets adopted and what role the selectmen play in that process. So, Mr. Chairman, could you please explain that?
I cannot. I can ask our town administrator to explain it.
Generally, a board is free to adopt regulations as they see fit to carry out the duties of their department. In some cases, if it's required by state statute, they may be required to publish them. I don't believe that would be the case with cemeteries, because usually they're not statewide organizations. So it would just be that they would vote to adopt a regulation and submit it to the Board of Selectmen. I don't think the Selectmen need to approve it. I think it's just Selectmen have the ultimate authority in that they appoint the board. So, if they were dissatisfied with the regulation the board had adopted, they would be free to change the composition of the board, although that's not usual. Usually when you appoint a board, you appoint them and trust their judgment to make a proper decision. But as far as I know, the board is free to set, adopt its own regulations.
I am unclear on it, Sean, because I don't know that we've adopted any regulations that I can remember.
Well, I know, though, for example, Solid Waste Committee has adopted regulations for operation of the transfer station.
The selectmen were involved in that.
No, and the Board of Health has adopted numerous regulations for sanitation and whatnot. They're a little bit more guided by the state because they're into public health issues. So it's a variety of, you have the plastic bag committee. They're just a study committee at this point, so they haven't got into adopting regulations. There's a regulation, there's a bylaw, and there's a statute. A regulation is a rule made by a board or a commission. A bylaw is a bylaw voted by the town meeting. And any bylaw has to be submitted to the Attorney General for approval. And then the third would be a statute, and a statute is the law passed by the legislature and signed by the governor. So those are the three levels. Here you're dealing with a regulation made by the board. It could be posed as a bylaw, which would require town meeting approval. So if they wanted to submit an article on the town meeting warrant and have the town meeting vote on it, that would be adopted as a bylaw, and that would be submitted to the Attorney General. And the Attorney General has 90 days to review it and either approve it, modify it, or reject it. And a statute is out of our hands. That's something adopted by the state legislature.
Well, what I'm first trying to understand is I want to understand the process and how you connect the dots between the cemetery regulation that's being proposed and the enforcement mechanism whereby people that violate it would be required to pay fines to the town. So you're engaging the police department in the enforcement, I would imagine. So that's my first concern.
Normally, that would probably be done by a bylaw adopted by the town meeting, I would think, but I'll run that by town council to see if he would concur, or whether a regulation of a board can similarly be enforced.
Mr. Sweeney, my principal focus here is, obviously I'm a dog owner who enjoys walking their dogs in the cemetery. I'm also an owner of plots in the cemetery. And I'm a responsible dog owner, and most of the times that I've been in the cemetery, I've only come across other responsible dog owners who are walking their dogs solely in the roadways. The dogs are leashed, which is a town, I guess that's a town bylaw or regulation, that there's a leash law. And the people are picking up after their dogs. And I'm just wondering if the commission and Mr. Feeney gave any consideration to the fact that no matter where you are in town, there will always be responsible dog owners and there'll be irresponsible dog owners. Now, I'm talking solely about the town roadways that are contained within that area. I can't see how that would lead to any desecration of the cemetery grounds if the dogs never leave the roadway. And that certainly goes to your concern about the sections that I would imagine you're describing along Dale Street that really look like just sections that abut the roadway and aren't really part of the cemetery. There are very few places you can walk dogs in town, be in the roadways, not have to worry about being hit by a car, and avoid subjecting your dogs to the rampant tick problem that exists in town. And I just wonder what was discussed. I've sent emails to Mike Sullivan, to Christine, hoping that the Cemetery Commission would certainly listen to reasonable dog owners that don't want to see the cemetery being shut off to dogs.
I think we've listened to everybody, and from what I hear, and we've read your letter, and other people who have sent letters to us. And the decision came that due to health, the health is the guys that work in that cemetery. When they hit something with a lawnmower, it flies the dust, and that's not just dust. It's dog dew. And every one of them, I know, because I follow them through there. I go up there sometimes 2 and 3 times a day at any hour, at dusk and then when it's dark. And I've had people up there, the same thing. There's one that lets the dog run, the leash, the dog runs. He's gone across graves. He's on the middle of the road. I don't know if she's got a bag. This is a big problem, and it's a health thing. It's more than just your dogs. There's other places in town you can walk your dogs. In fact, they go by my house, and I can show you the waste on my lawn. And I'm going to wait for the guy who gets it, because I'm going to bring it back to his lawn.
Mr. Feeney, I think that I share your frustration with irresponsible dog owners who don't pick up after their dogs, and I certainly see it all over town. Part of what needs to happen here is education, right? So what's been said, mixed messages have existed because the cemetery regulations said that for years dogs were allowed leashed in the cemetery. But yet there's a sign at the entrance of the cemetery on Dale Street that says no dogs allowed, right? So it's like, how do you resolve that? What you do is you educate the public and you tell the public, you can walk your dog in the cemetery, you need to be responsible, pick up after it, keep your dog on a leash, and keep it in the roadway.
No, our recommendation, the vote was taken, it's up to the selectmen to adopt the regulation. It's a regulation, it's not a bylaw, it's not a statute. That can be done by the selectmen. They will reissue this book with the new regulations if they see fit. It's up to them. That's all we do is recommend.
So let me just ask you for the record, Mr. Sweeney, has that been your past experience with past boards of selectmen in your long tenure being involved in the Cemetery Commission?
I think so.
Okay. So I
The board,
think,
let me say something here. The cemetery is a private cemetery. It's not a town cemetery. The roads in there are not town roads. They are cemetery roads. Anybody, and that's how I've investigated this. We didn't, the only reason they are called town roads, okay, is when they went in there, they were all dirt when I was a kid. Then all of a sudden, they needed to tar the road because of certain things. It became tar roads because the town did it. That's why they called it town roads. That's the only reason, and that's why we discussed this today. Al Manganello, who lives at the other gate on Main Street, he says they pull the dog, the cars in there, they get out, the dogs run loose across the dam over to the old part, the new part of the cemetery. The other ones, very seldom you'll see them in the old part. That's mostly the problems are the newer part up by where you live, in by the bottom of Dale Street. That's where we got a big problem. By shutting those off, we hope this can maybe settle things, but it's not going to settle the dog situation. It's going to settle the people, sometimes other people from other towns coming in there.
So if I understand what you've said here tonight, is that the cemetery board proposes a regulation and the Board of Selectmen review it and ultimately approve it?
Right. We're not a board, we're a commission. by the
Your
way.
commission, but that's your recollection of the historical procedure as it's taken place over the many years that you've been on the commission?
That's right, as long as I've been on it. But before that, the commissioners did a lot of things that the selectmen didn't get to know. That's going back into the early, I was 60s, maybe 50s, when I worked up there.
Well, I think as a town resident, I'm very thankful that we have a very engaged Board of Selectmen, have had very engaged boards of selectmen for many years advocating for the interests of town residents. I would ask the board, since you will be the ones deciding on adopting proposed regulations from the Cemetery Commission, that you think about the broader concept of public education where it comes to being a responsible dog owner. Because this goes not only to the cemetery, but also to other areas of town as well. It's a town-wide problem. I would like the Board of Selectmen to consider what I propose, which is adopting a reasonable regulation that would allow townspeople to walk their dogs in the cemetery leashed, complying with the town leash law, restricting their walking of the dogs to the paved roadways, and making sure, obviously, as any responsible dog owner should do, to pick up after their dogs. Although it's been said here tonight that these are private roadways, I walk through the cemetery. People use all of those roadways to access the pond, to fish. There are families there with children. There are people that just look like they're just driving in there to take a drive. People riding bicycles, they're walking, whatever. The cemetery is an area of town that should be able to be enjoyed by all town residents, including responsible pet owners. And I just want you to consider that in your deliberations. Thank you very much, and thank you, sir.
Anybody else that wanted to have a comment about this?
Kevin Stoddard, 6 Baker Road. I'm just wondering if maybe the fine, I have no problem with it. I think it's disgusting that people are leaving stuff and it's causing an issue with the town employees that are mowing the property there. What if the fine was for any person walking a dog who doesn't have a mechanism, a bag or a scooper, to pick it up?
Somebody's got to enforce it.
Well, somebody's got to enforce it on the other end.
The other end, no, the way we said we were going to do it, right? We talked about this also. We'll increase the fines from 50 to 100 to 100 and 200 if it doesn't work.
Right. And I'm just saying, if I'm in there or Sean is in there, we have our bags, we have the mechanisms to clean up the waste. The waste is the issue, correct?
You're going to walk all over the cemetery,
The waste is the issue,
right?
right? If we have the mechanism to pick up the waste, why should we pay the fine?
But are you
If
going to
you're
walk?
walking your dog without a mechanism to
My
pick it up,
question is, are you
they
guys
should
going
pay
to
the
walk
fine.
over the cemetery, all over the cemetery? Because it's not only the roads, that's what I'm saying.
Right,
The roads are not that's just one of the issues.
right. But your main issue
This
is
is
that
up
there's
to these
waste.
guys here. No, we're giving them our recommendation. They can do what they wish. But if something happens, one of our guys up there, Ken's guys, health issue, he comes up with lung cancer. Okay, you want to answer that one then?
I think if it's a health issue
Yeah.
in the cemetery, there should be a town-wide law, a town-wide rule,
It's up to selectmen.
okay? if that's the catalyst for putting this together in the proposal as it stands, because it's a health issue for people in the cemetery, it's a health issue for everybody in town.
I agree.
So there should be, the leash law with cleanup, and you have to have something on you to prove that you're the type of
Monies,
person.
by the way, the monies that were collected for the fine was going to be offsetting some of the costs of the cremation area, by the way.
I just wanted to follow up, and I'm sure that Mr. DeSorga probably knows the history of this. If there's a great concern, and I would share the concern for the health and welfare of town employees that are working in the cemetery. I mean, wasn't the cemetery originally the town dump?
No.
No.
One section of the center of the cemetery?
No, the dump was the
Town
cemetery.
dump was up off of what is now Route 27. That's that flat area was the original
Yeah,
dump.
no, it's
But
always
it's
been
never in the
cemetery.
cemetery.
It's across from the town garage, next to the town garage, as you
Where the
go
dump was.
27.
They used to
The
bury
down.
floral, when they died off the flowers on the side of the cemetery. That's what that was.
I mean, way back
Oh.
they had it for grazing,
Yeah.
for animals, but it was never
When
a
I
dump.
purchased my 6 plots, Tracy Mitchell was explaining that one section that I looked at, he said, this used to be a dump. So perhaps he was mistaken.
I know what he's talking about. The road down towards the vault on the right-hand side.
Yeah, where they would just.
Tracy's got his,
So
right in the corner,
Yeah.
back there.
this,
Yeah, the flowers.
this issue was brought to the selectmen's attention after Memorial Day, when there was an incident that involved a lot of disrespect of someone who was at the cemetery visiting a gravesite, a very disrespectful dog owner who was irresponsible. Clearly, there's a problem, and from hearing what Mr. Sweeney says, there's clearly a problem for the employees there. My concern is that I don't think that I think we need to figure out a mechanism that works, and I'm not sure that just having a fine is gonna work because of the fact that we have no enforcement of the pooper scooper law in town as it is. And so that I think we need to craft a solution that works. I know that after this issue came up, I became aware that the cemetery that I drive past on my way to work in Wellesley has a sign that says you can walk your dogs on the roadways. I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, you're
The other
not
thing too
creating your
that-
regulations, Tom, so much as I understand you're handing them to us to enact.
And
it
the other
sounds
thing
like.
was, when we talked to the fellow with the cremation area too, he says, you gotta be careful, he says, with animal waste or urination too, that can discolor your granite too, and it spots it. So in a rainy day, if something's flying up there, that can pit the granite. I mean, we're not talking about new granite. I mean, a new granite can scratch. But this new one that we're talking about for the cremation area will not do that. But he says, you're still gonna have a problem with that. He says, no matter when you get animals in here, you're gonna have, it doesn't have to be dogs. It could be,
Right.
wild
And
animals.
so we're just trying to control the animals that we can control. All right, well, it sounds like the selectmen then have an issue that we have to sort out and figure out, and,
But we decided that the third Thursday of the month will be our meeting at the town garage.
Good.
We're gonna be
Excellent.
meeting at 9:00.
excellent.
There'll be 1, 2, or 3 of us there. So if somebody wants to come down and discuss something, we'd be more than glad to come down and discuss it with us. Because I've got to get my wife to the hospital on the first meeting in October. But Al will be there, or
Can someone in the cemetery commission or the DPW get us in writing what you've recommended? Because I didn't make notes of everything. I
Donna
didn't-
has it all. She was taking
Okay.
notes this
All
morning.
right, I didn't realize
I
that.
thought she'd have it, but evidently didn't get done today.
Didn't
But
realize
that's all
that
right.
we were gonna
That's-
have to
they're
do
busy down
something,
there.
but it sounds like we're
A
gonna
lot
have
of
to do
things cooking
something.
with the roads.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Next, we hear from the Energy Committee. Marie Zach Nolan, Chair.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for inviting me to come to talk to you about some of our activities, the Medfield Energy Committee. I don't see anyone else from that committee here, so except Mike, who is a very, and Pete. They're both ex officio members of our committee, so they know what's going on as well. But I thought I would just tell you briefly about the three of the main initiatives that we're looking at. The first one is an energy manager. As you know, we got a grant from Division of Energy Resources for full-time energy manager for 1 year and half the salary for the following year. We advertised a position in July and August. We interviewed 4 people at the end of August. I was on vacation, but other members of the Energy Committee did the interviewing, as well as some town officials and a couple of people from town departments. We made an offer to one person, but I don't know exactly what happened in the end.
Made an
Working
offer
out.
to an individual, that salary range that was advertised, and she was looking for a much higher salary. So we've contacted her, waiting to hear back from her as to what her final decision would be in that regard. So, but she was looking for, I think $17,000 higher than the position was advertised. And the position is funded by a state grant. So there are several of these positions that have been advertised. Many of the towns around have received grants and are hiring. So it seems to be well out of the range of what the position requires. We're still up in the air as far as that goes right now.
Yeah, because we had already made an offer, so we're waiting to hear back, but our plan would be to re-advertise the position and put it into a lot of, for university colleges, a good entry-level position.
Right. There are several schools now in Massachusetts that have programs for energy managers, facility managers, Mass Maritime being one, University of Mass Lowell, University of Mass Amherst, Wentworth has a program. So we're going to see if we can keep searching. So
We were hoping this person to be a liaison to our committee and help us carry out some of our initiatives and work on some of the grants administration that we have, and be a good educator of the public of some of the programs that we're doing. But we also were hoping that this person was going to work with the facilities, because we have a lot of new facilities coming online, and help make them as efficient as possible.
yeah, well, what we'd like to do is transition it into a facilities manager. School, and this is similar to what we did with the IT department. We started out using the school's IT director, and gradually, as the school demands increased and our demands increased, began funding part of the salary, and I think we funded 20%, the school funded 80%, but then it kept growing and growing, and we finally added a second full-time position. The school funded the director, we funded the additional position, and then this past year, for the first time, we consolidated the functions and set up an IT budget that Chris worked out with the school IT manager. We're looking at something similar. We have the library, the town hall, the center at Medfield, the town garage is just finished last week. We're looking at a public safety building, and we also have the original FAF Center. So we have a lot of public buildings that have been run over the years by the seat of our pants, I guess would be the best way to say it. We've been trying to patch things together and keep things going. These new buildings are a lot more sophisticated. The HVA systems, the heating, it is, but the whole operation, the security systems, and they require a different level of maintenance, for one thing. As somebody said recently at one of the meetings, you can build the building, but if you don't maintain it, you're throwing your money away. And I think that's the situation we're looking at.
Well, plus I think if you have a librarian should be running the library and being a librarian, not dealing with energy issues that really he or she is not trained to be doing. Or the director of our senior center should be concerned with the issues of, the senior citizens, not with energy, or the police chief or the fire chief. Let them do their jobs.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily their knowledge of how to make a most energy efficient building. So it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and the other part of that is, as you said, energy efficiency. If we can maintain these systems properly, there's an opportunity to save a lot on your energy bills too. So the position can pay for itself, so that's what we're looking towards, and that's why we want to take time, make sure we're doing it right.
That's where we are with that initiative. The second one I wanted to tell you about is how we had received a grant last year from the state for technical assistance. It was $12,500, and we used a portion of that to hire a solar consulting firm called Solar Design Associates. And so they did kind of a feasibility study on 3 sites that we identified as potential for solar in town on municipal sites. And they came in to present some of their findings last week at our meeting, but they're also going to be coming and visit us in another month, October 14th at 7:30, to talk to us further. And then we have not gotten a final report from them, so I don't really want to talk too much about the findings because we still need to digest what they're saying. But what we had them look at was the old landfill, and the bottom line was that it's not capped, and it really is not a good candidate to do it. But the other ones were on the town garage, the new roof that's solar ready, and also solar array by the wastewater treatment plant. And the director of the wastewater treatment plant got yet another grant, $180,000 grant from the state that he can use to put towards a solar array. So Solar Design Associates are looking at different financing arrangements, interest rates, running several different scenarios, and they also investigated the size. So they told us the potential amount of PV that could be put on these 2 sites, and also interconnection, how feasible it was. So more later about what their findings are.
I think they said that there's a potential for a PV array at the treatment plant to provide at least half of the energy that the treatment plant uses. And the treatment plant energy bills run around, average probably around $10,000 a month. So this is potentially good savings. The problem is, what's the payback period? Now the grant will help that because it's $180,000, so it can offset the cost. But it's something we have to be very careful. But there is some potential for really good energy savings there if we're careful.
The other thing, if you can just keep in mind, I know we've talked about it before, but I sent you some of those photos. I took a ride down to the new hockey rink they built in Falmouth. And in addition to having the solar onto the roof, the entire parking lot area is covered in solar panels that are down there. And we have such a huge area of parking at the high school and the middle school complex. And they're going to pay for the entire, I think there's 3 rinks in there. If any consideration be given, there's a huge area of land. It's all just sitting as blacktop right now that the more I look, it has some potential. I don't know if you've looked at that at all as well.
Well, we've looked at that. We haven't asked our consultant. We could ask them now that we have them working for us. We can ask what their experience is in providing solar, like carports kind of a thing, because they're at REI. Mass Logan Airport has these carports. At this time, without subsidies, I'm not really sure how feasible they are, but it certainly would be good use. I agree with all the school parking lots, so I think that we can ask them what they think about it. The last program I want to talk about was that we're evaluating is exploring is Solar Massachusetts. It's a program that's been the Mass Clean Energy Center has partnership with Mass DOER to do this, and this is the 4th year, 2011, 2012, 2013. They've had programs, and it's basically looking to increase the adoption of small-scale solar electricity systems through a grassroots educational campaign driven by local volunteers. And there's a tiered pricing structure that will potentially increase savings for everyone. That's the premise. The application's due October 15th. We're not sure whether or not we're going to apply for it, but the state selects 10 communities, and they work with them to put out an RFP and select a vendor, a solar installer. You need to have a solar coach, and so our committee is busy doing other initiatives like the ones I was just mentioned, so we don't see ourselves as a solar coach. So I'm reaching out Pete's helping me identify any people out, especially in the audience too, if anyone wants to be a solar coach, to take on that job of really being the person that's educating the town, sets up events, be available on the phone when people have questions about it, and the liaison between the vendor and the people that want to sign up. So the idea is that once the vendor's selected, there's that pricing program. More people sign up, it'll be less expensive. They can either choose to purchase the installation, or they can go through leasing their roof and have a power purchase agreement with the vendor. I just spoke to, this past week, the solar coach from Needham, and I got some insights from him, and it does sound like a lot of work, so you do have to have a commitment. We have 2 people that may be interested in co-coaching, and that's possible, but we're still talking about it. He was saying how important it is to have the backing of the town and different organizations. So we've reached out, for example, to Medfield Green to see if they have any people that might be interested in doing this.
I know Franklin is doing this also. Is there a certain number of people that you need to have in order for that to take place?
No, I can share with you some of the results of this past year. And for example, Needham has here, it was a 6-month program for them, though they did extend it. So it's more than what this shows on the website, but they have 99 contracts signed. Adams has 18 contracts signed. So it all depends, too, on the size of your town. Andover has 78 contracts that were signed. I think that you may not be able to get that much better of a deal. It's kind of my sense, but it's kind of like peer pressure. Your friends are doing it. It's, there's a lot of banners, signs in yards kind of thing. So you're kind of educating each other about it. So I think it's more that kind of groundswell that works. I feel like we shouldn't ignore it. We should really explore it. I don't know how many more years the state's going to offer this, and we have so many residents here in Medfield versus commercial, industrial, or even municipal buildings to provide solar. I just felt like we should give opportunity to homeowners and educate them on the benefits and costs of solar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading up on some of this stuff, and one article I read, it said about 25% of houses are suitable for solar. You have to have the right orientation. You have to have a certain distance without trees so that the sunlight can reach the panels. So if your house faces north instead of south, or the main part of your roof, or if it faces east, and not every house is suitable for it, but it can provide a big incentive. I've talked to a couple of people in town that have negative electric bills.
Sure.
They have the 2-way meters, and they put more back into the system than they take out. So that's worked very well. The other thing I've been reading is climate change movement, and how the young people are getting very involved in it. And I think you're going to see that the younger people, just as they did with their tobacco, hounding their parents to quit smoking, things like that, that's going to be one of the next big waves. It's worked with smoking. To a certain degree, I think it's helped with the recycling. I think it's encouraged adults to get a little bit more on the stick in terms of the recycling efforts, and you're probably going to see it in terms of the whole energy conservation movement, I think so.
We did that Sagewell program a few years ago, so that people can still get on that website and find out about their town. I believe their residents, and they may even be able to see about. They can find a solar vendor through that as well, but that may give them some insight into whether or not they can have solar.
Can I just encouragement? Do you think you'll be coming back to town meeting again to try to get Medfield to be a green community again? Town meeting?
That's a good question, and I don't have the answer to that. I think our community feels like we really need to have the town support us and tell us they really want to do that, because it is a lot of work to put that together. But we do have the solar bylaw, so that's great. As time goes by, we'll find out more about the stretch code. The state still hasn't really told us what the future stretch code's going to look like. So if we know more, then there'll be more definite certainties, and so people will feel more comfortable voting.
We learned last week that the public safety building is being built to the stretch code standards here in town, so that's good to hear.
Current stretch code, and I was referring to the next one, the next cycle.
Yep.
I think that the committee's been doing great about thinking about energy efficiency and also working to get incentives to pay for the improvements.
Well, the selectmen were certainly in favor of becoming a green communities the last time, and so I imagine we probably still are, so I would
Okay,
encourage you to
thank you.
think about pushing forward with it. I know it's a lot of work, but thank you for everything you guys have done. 30%, Mike, that they've saved the town on energy costs?
Yeah. That's
5
one of the
years.
difficulties of the green
Over 20.
community. You don't get credit for that. You have to save another 20%,
Yeah,
so
well.
it's going to be very difficult to,
Because of
Keep
your
that
base
part of it.
year, selecting the proper base
Right,
year.
but you guys have saved the town a ton of money, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is Selectman DeSorga wishes to discuss widening Pine Street with Superintendent Feeney and Police Chief Meany, and I gather from how many people are still here? All the residents of Pine Street are here.
The wording on this, I have no wish to widen Pine Street. I received a phone call, Courtney is here, and Courtney lives up on Hawthorne area, and she has some small children, and she just had a number of questions concerning the windy Pine Street without sidewalks, the volume of traffic, the speeding, and she wanted to know how to address that, and I said the best way would be to come before the Board of Selectmen. So, Courtney, to give you a chance if you want to come up.
Thanks very much for having me. This is my
Thank you for
first
coming.
meeting, very informative. I want to start with just a little introduction about myself. I grew up in Medfield. I'm a proud member of the class of '93, Medfield High. And Mr. DeSorger was my 8th grade social studies teacher. He tells me I now have to call him Richard, so that's an adjustment for me, but I'll do my best. I lived in many other places, but returned to Medfield just a little over 2 years ago. It's amazing how your priorities change over time. I now have a husband and 2 small children, and I was eager to live in a town that appreciates families as well as sees the value in community. I work at Boston Children's Hospital, where we also value the community. And one of our missions is to provide the highest quality health care in the world. We strive to be the best in everything we do, particularly when it comes to patient safety. When something goes wrong at my hospital, we ruthlessly investigate why in an attempt to make sure it never happens again. But in addition to understanding errors, we're just as interested in understanding near misses. A near miss is just as it sounds. It's an instance where no patient is harmed, but a patient was almost harmed. A near miss is corrected before anyone's impacted, but the potential for a negative outcome is there. Boston Children's tracks near misses just as ruthlessly as we track errors. For us, a good save is not sufficient. We believe change must occur so that near misses don't happen ever again, too. This context helps explain why I'm here tonight. I feel responsible to report that I've seen many near misses on Pine Street. I've seen bikers almost hit by cars. Just driving here this evening, I saw a minivan trying to avoid a runner while a landscaping car was coming on the other side. The road just simply isn't able to accommodate modern vehicles, pedestrians, and bikers. From preliminary conversations with Richard, I understand that making Pine Street safer is an incredibly expensive undertaking. However, I don't think the price tag should keep us from evaluating possible improvements. And I'm not alone. Your website that you've started asks for community suggestions, and the Make Pine Street Safer for Bikers idea got the most votes. In fact, over 50% more votes than the second highest idea. Since my days here as a child, I've seen the town make great strides in other roads like South Street and Causeway. Like Boston Children's, Medfield's the kind of place that acts in the best interest of the community. Our town doesn't just respond to accidents, we strive to prevent them from occurring. And with that, I would like your consideration to investigate the near misses on Pine Street.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last week, I was with Jeff Marsden, and he was telling me that the first year out of college, he ended up teaching school at a school that he had gone to, and all the teachers said that he had to call them by their first names, and he said he couldn't. I know that Pine Street was, when I moved to town, it was a dirt road. That was my first night in Medfield. I tried to go home by this road that I saw on the map that was Pine Street, and I started on Green Street, and I ended up on what I thought was Pine Street, and sure enough, it turned into a dirt road, and I went on that for a mile, and I thought, this isn't working, so I turned around and went back, not knowing that it would have worked, but I know that I had heard when I was first on the board, I think that when Pine Street was paved, that there was talk about putting sidewalks in, and that the residents of Pine Street at that time didn't want sidewalks.
that has a bit of an unusual history. It was paved because Mr. Koch was putting 56 houses up the end of Pine Street.
Oh.
And his original concept was to put a gate up the end of Pine Street and have it accessible to residents only. That was thrown out by the planning board because it's a public way, and we weren't going to create an exclusive gated community for Mr. Koch's benefit so he could sell his houses at higher prices. His then second suggestion, or his development company suggestion, was that we leave it as a dirt road and that he would give us money to buy a truck in lieu of paving the road. This is the same Mr. Koch from the Koch family you read about in the national press all the time. He's one of the famous Koch brothers. We were kind of insulted that at that suggestion and rejected that.
What were we supposed to do with the truck, Mike?
Whatever we wanted to. He was just going to buy us a truck so he wouldn't have to pave the road.
Oh, great.
So, and the planning board required him to pave the road. There was some talk about taking out the curve, and I think at the time it was decided that it was better to leave the curve in to act as a mechanism to slow the traffic down, because you can't go too fast on that curve or you're going to end up very wet in the swamp. Wetlands. I'm old-fashioned. I have to watch my vocabulary. It is a difficult situation. I know over the years, I remember one day when we painted a yellow line down the road, and I started getting calls from people who didn't want a yellow line, wanted to know why we're putting it down, and they said they thought it would become a speedway to Dover Center if we had a yellow line down the road. It's a difficult situation. People love the scenic value of it. They love the rural character. I can understand what you're saying about the road being tricky. I've found out over the years that sometimes when a road is so bad, it actually is a little bit safer. And the one that, in my mind, that stands out is the Curve Street Bridge. If you go over the Curve Street Bridge too fast, you know what you're going to be facing. You could have a car coming the other way. So I think anyone who's familiar with the Curve Street Bridge is very cautious when they go over there. And I think to a certain extent, and the chief is standing back there, he can criticize me or take the other position. But I think Pine Street is one of those streets where it is so narrow and so windy that people tend to drive a bit more slowly. And that may prevent accidents as well as sidewalks. And although I will say, since we built South Street with the sidewalk, it's been much safer. But I think you have to weigh the value of the scenery, of whether it's going to, straightening it out and putting sidewalks in is going to generate a lot more traffic that will make it less safe, versus, it would be a benefit to have it safe for bikeways or for a bike path and sidewalks. And if there's some way you can address all those, maybe put a sidewalk somewhere in the woods or something, and I don't know, but it's not an easy situation to address all the interests. It's a very tricky problem.
I was told there's by one of the residents up on Pine Street that at the end of Alcott and at the end of Hawthorne, there actually is a town walkway easement that goes through to Flintlock Lane. So like the suggestion was, for anyone living in the Hawthorne area, rather than having their kids walk down Pine Street, if they use that way, once they get onto Flintlock, there's sidewalks that go all the way into the center of town. I don't know how open that area is, but we just looked at the assessors map, so it is a town. You're shaking your head no.
I wouldn't take the assessors maps because the boundaries don't meet what's actually in the ground versus the aerial. Sometimes those houses appear to be on the road or on the right of way.
Well, and I think it
We go over
deliberately
right
was
away.
left that way to access because of the developer in the town, but it shows two walkways that go, one from Alcott and the other from Hawthorne. And I don't know, just a suggestion, if that is open,
It's wet.
I'm sorry?
Wet.
It's ledge. That's ledge.
It traps water. Don't forget, ledge traps water too. some of those places. You'll see water come down through the ledge.
Thanks, Sam.
I don't know, it'd be something you'd have to go up and take a look at. I don't know offhand, I'm not that familiar with that
You
particular
really got to
area.
look at that, because there's ledge all the way back up and off of Carol Ann.
Right.
That's where you're talking, and you're coming down through. Or the next one down, which half of that right of way was shut off. The road, the stub. In each house on either side owns that stub, the town doesn't.
Which
That's all that
road-
was left, I'm pretty sure.
Which road is that?
The end of Lantern Lane there.
Yeah, but I'm talking Hawthorne. There's a path right now. People use that right now.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and there's one off of Pine
So-
Street too,
But
further
you're gonna
down.
take,
Yeah, that cuts
who's gonna
through.
take the responsibility for if somebody falls there on the ledge?
Well, if it's owned by the town of Medfield, how would that be any
The town of
different
Medfield
than?
will take the responsibility.
Sure, then as we would on a sidewalk or a street or anywhere.
Whatever you want, you're making the rules.
Well, I'm not making the rules, but
Yeah,
I'm
you
simply,
are.
I'm simply trying to get an alternative if it's safer to use that to get to a sidewalk on Flintlock than having kids come down kids come down Pine Street. That might be a safer alternative.
Yeah, they'll be going through somebody's backyard on.
It's not someone's backyard if it's an easement and owned by the town of Medfield and was deliberately put there to give access.
That's the one that, what's his name from Milford had, right, the subdivision?
The town owns 40 acres around that Hawthorne subdivision. In order to provide access to it,
Open
at the
space.
time the subdivision was approved, there were 2 pedestrian easements
Right.
that Richard referred to.
Right. That's a plan,
But
that's why you
access-
couldn't use it for
Yes.
anything.
The other end of one of those 20 acre, there's basically, I think, roughly 20 acre parcels.
Yeah.
One of those parcels comes out, the back end of it comes out onto the stub at Flintlock.
Whitelock, exactly. I know
Now,
where it is.
you're right, I don't know what is in between. I know there is ledge, because
There's
I
a lot of
remember
ledge, yeah.
at one time we were looking that as a potential site for a water tower.
Exactly, I remember that.
And we never followed through on that. We ended up building a water tower on Mount Nebo.
Yeah.
So I know there is ledge there. I don't know about water. I've never quite been through there. But if you said there's a path, do you know where that path goes to?
The path goes out to Flintlock,
It's gonna
No,
be
but where's the
walk
other
path.
end? From Flintlock, where does it go to?
well, in between 2 houses.
So people use that to get to Flintlock? No?
All the time, yeah.
They do?
Yeah,
Okay.
and ride your bike through there and
We
start
use
there.
it all the time.
So it
Is it well marked?
It's clear where to go, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
So is it a relatively safe?
Chris Caldy, Pine Street. I'm just saying that the path you're referring to, Richard, is well used by the kids in the neighborhood in order to avoid going down Pine Street. There's actually also let's say there's minimal people who allow you to go through their yards to come out at the cul-de-sac on Green Street as well. So you can cut through to get to either Green on that right away, which I'm not clear is actually public, but the people, the owners are fine with it. And then there is an easement, as you point out, at the tip of Hawthorne, which connects right over to Flintlock. And everyone goes through there regularly in order to get on the sidewalks and go down to town.
Anybody else that had comments?
Yes, I don't think that addresses Courtney's problem, though. As far as like the traffic on Pine Street and how fast people go, how close the telephone poles are to the road and the trees, it just seems like, the beginning and the end are fine because they're wide and they're newer. It's that little middle section that's kind of a pain.
Where the curves are, the S curves.
Coming back to me, I thought I'd point out up in Westwood on High Rock Road, if you're familiar with that cut through, if you will, people take it off of Powysset. They've recently installed speed bumps and signage, and it's very effective. It's a short little span, and it certainly works well if as an option for slowing cars down on Pine Street, since the idea of straightening it out is certainly a huge undertaking.
Christopher Smick, Pine Street. I'd like to second what you just said. From a number of points of view, like some people in this room, I lived on that road when it was gravel. I know what it was like, and I've been through this conversation before in terms of widening it, and there was a debate about whether people would go faster. They go much faster now that it's paved. And my driveway is now a dangerous driveway. It didn't used to be with the gravel. But I think that the simplest, I'd like to suggest, I've gotten older and smarter, a pragmatic answer let's try the least expensive thing first. I think the speed bumps idea has a lot of merit. I have a lot of expertise here. I run on Pine Street, I drive on Pine Street, I walk on Pine Street, I live on Pine Street. I don't think that there are a lot of children going up and down long distances on Pine Street to go to school. They use the buses for that. I see some bicycles, but 98% of the bicycles I see are adult bikers. There are a couple of important changes that have happened to Pine Street over and above Brother Koch paving it. One of them is the incredibly increased traffic because people are coming off of North Street to use Pine Street to get from Medfield to Dover, because they can get a jump on that traffic at the Dover light by coming up Pine Street. The traffic through there in the morning is 10 times what it used to be. The other big change is bicycles. A lot of books now publish Pine Street as being a great biker's road. And the bikers don't cause a problem when they ride single file, but they ride double and triple talking to each other, and then that causes a huge problem. And people drive fast. What do I mean by the cheapest solution? I second that. I also commute on that road, and I don't like the speed bumps because they're effective. And I think that didn't cost a lot of money, and they've done a very good job. If you look at Conant Street and High Rock Road in Westwood, the Westwood DPW seems to have done a sensitive job with speed bumps. They're not high enough to cause problems with mufflers and suspensions. They do work. At least they slow me down. So I'd like to suggest that would be cheaper than the cost of widening and straightening Pine Street. And if it turns out the speed bumps don't solve the problem, it's not that expensive to take them out. But the idea of widening and straightening Pine Street is going to be hugely expensive. Thank you.
Thank you.
One
Chris?
more comment from
Okay.
me. Another option, though I don't know the cost, is where you put in the solar-powered speed signs so that it's clear when you're going over the speed limit. I've seen those work effectively in streets, like Dangerous Street in Canton, where they've had regular accidents on a corner. And I know I can't speak for the cost, but it is also, I believe, another effective way to slow drivers down.
I've found over the years, I remember one of our former police chiefs telling me one time that he counted the number of signs from Medfield Center to Route 128, and I think it was something like 250 signs. And he said what happens with signs is you get too many. And when you get too many, nobody pays attention to them. So they can be, it can be overdone. You have to be careful how you use the signs so that they're effective. Because I live on a narrow street. I live on Nebo Street, which is similar in that it's narrow. It has a lot of bikers. It has vertical curves instead of horizontal curves. It goes up and down, sort of roller coaster effect. And one of the things I've said to some of my neighbors on occasion when they complain about speeders is, on a road like that, if you drive the speed limit yourself, whoever's behind you can't go fast. So one of the most effective things to do is make sure you're going under 30 miles an hour when you drive the street yourself. I have a feeling some of the people who get very impatient when they're riding behind me trying to cut up Nebo Street to avoid the center are very angry because they're not on their street. But if I went and drove the same speed on their streets, they'd be the first ones to call the police. So you have to take some measures on your own, drive under the speed limit on your own street, and you'll slow down a lot of the speeders just by doing that alone.
Although, Mike, I remember when Chief Hurley studied the speeding on Indian Hill Road, he discovered that all the speeders were Medfield residents for the most part, and so that it was us that was the enemy.
You're right. It's a crime we're all guilty of, I think. We all like to speed on someone else's road, I guess. So.
Michael Rose, a resident of Pine Street for many years, since 1985, not as long as you, Courtney, but I commend you for trying to slow people down, being a resident there and bringing up 5 children and being concerned about their safety as well. One of the recommendations, although I will offer my services if the town's looking for someone to hire to police cyclists, I'll be happy to do that. But One of the other recommendations I would throw out there, in addition to the speed bumps, is also speed humps, or the reverse, where they have, I think it's on Powysset Street as well, they have a reverse bump, which is somewhat helpful as well. Certainly it will slow down speeders because it will hit your muffler and other parts of the car. But also something that I've noticed in towns like, I think, Brookline and I think Westwood may have one, but is a three-way stop sign in a couple of locations, which would get people to slow down. I'm on the section of Pine Street where you come around the curve across from Shining Valley Road, where people tend to speed up because it's a straightaway, so they're trying to make up for the lost time they had with the curves. But you know, we've all seen it all. You know, people speed, whether it be the oversized landscaping vehicles or the cyclists or anything else. The key is to be aware all the time. I don't want to see the street widen. I don't think that necessarily would be the best thing to do, but I think, like you recommended, going another route, which would be maybe a more inexpensive way, would be to put the speed bumps in, as much as I wouldn't like it either, and also maybe a three-way stop in a couple of locations that would bring people to a halt, and you know, maybe a couple of signs, but that would just be my recommendation.
Can I ask just if maybe Ken and then the chief could maybe just address, maybe Ken, Courtney's question, what would it be, just cost-wise, and then maybe some of the issues of speed bumps with plowing and things, and maybe the chief could just address what safety things we could do on Pine Street?
First of all, speed bumps, humps, they're all liability on streets. There was a catastrophic accident in Wayland where there was a major lawsuit. Gentleman on a bicycle hit a speed bump and hit a telephone pole shortly after that, and he's in a wheelchair today. So they are a liability, and I kind of have a tendency in between the bumps to make people try to make up for time, you know, and so the speeds continue. Widening Pine Street, the only reason I did many years ago South Street Extension was because of the fatalities and the amount of accidents on that road. I'm not aware of a high accident rate on Pine Street, so where our funds are limited, and are they going fast? That's a police matter. That's where the chief comes in with his radar, and he starts enforcing it. But speed humps and speed bumps, we're not really for. The other thing what happens with them is Pine Street hasn't got, on the part that we're talking about, enough drainage to support that kind of a system. So you're getting into, it's not a cheap solution. If you interrupt the water flow on the gutter lines and the water doesn't get off, it's going to be ice in the winter. So there's a lot of things when you get into trying to align a road. Why are you aligning it? Was there an accident there? Is there a large number of accidents there? I'm not aware of that on Pine Street. And, you know, maybe the narrow road, the tunnel vision is preventing that. But I don't know if you've got any accident records up there, Chief. But, you know, I'm not aware of any large amount of accidents on Pine Street. But, again, that's why when we spent the time on the design, on the extension, was because the accident rate. The school bus went off the road down there. We didn't have drainage. You know, there was icing on the road and things like that. So, and Pine Street is not a full depth, only on the upper part, reconstructed. So it's an older road, and you can't go down into it because it's not much of a road there. It's probably an old penetrated road. So I don't think that, you know, it's not cheap. It's an expensive fix if you're going to fool around with it. Is it worth fooling around with? I really, if it's speeding, that's a police matter, and we should be out there and we should be governing that through the police department. Chief.
Okay, so in checking with Bill Kingsbury, the easement that goes through over to Hawthorne, that's where the water main goes. That's why it's there. So that's what the easement's for. It's the water main that connects Flintlock to Hawthorne and over that part of Pine Street. And then Richard and I had a conversation today, and we talked about the speed trailer and those signs that I would like to try in a couple parts of town. And one of the things we have to look at is I've used the speed trailer down in Orchard Street a few times this summer, and we can leave it down there for a couple of days, and we have to bring it in to plug it in because there's so many trees, it doesn't charge. So along Pine Street, we'd have to find a place where it could charge, or to be there for like couple days at a time, bring it in, couple days at a time, bring it in. And then, but the sign would be a little bit simpler because it's a smaller panel, and we could maybe do a little bit better job of placing it somewhere that it would assist. Now, one of the things, you're absolutely right, signs everywhere, but those particular radar signs, there's a couple in Wellesley. I know the one in Canton the person was talking about just before you go over 95 and you head down where the elementary school is. If you get what's called driver feedback, you see the sign that says 30 miles an hour, it's like, okay, whoopee. If you are driving along and the sign says you're going 45 and the speed limit's 30, that's talking to you behind the wheel. So those signs over the past couple of 3 years have been shown to actually do some work. So that could potentially be a solution. The speed bumps, totally defer to Ken on all that part. The only thing I've heard the issue with, and I'm waiting to see if Westwood has the same thing, Dover had them when you take the right turn out of the center and you head over towards Needham. And what was occurring was, especially the landscaping trucks with the trailers, they go over them and you just hear ba-boom from one end to the other. So, you know, if you said, go ahead, put them in, put 2 or 3 up there, just realize, you know, pickup trucks, the dump trucks, the small dump trucks, the landscaping trailers, you're going to know when every single one of them goes down. And Dover took them out last year and flattened it out. So, or do they have raised? No, they just.
No, they took them out.
They just put. They were raised crosswalks, right? And they just took them out. So that's, you know, so that's a couple of considerations about the speed bumps. You know, the rest of the stuff is all, you know, engineering and whatnot. I'm just doing the point from because I have a request for one down in Plain Street. First, would like some sort of speed control measure across the street down there also. The other thing is it came to great concern at the start of the school year when Dover was paving the road and everyone that was normally driving down Center Street came right down Pine Street. The skinny little section of Dover and then came through Pine Street. And you had, 2 or 3 days of lots and lots and lots of traffic. Right.
Trucks, huge trucks.
Right.
I
Yep.
saw it twice, little kids,
Yep.
nobody knew, people were walking their dogs and these
Right.
huge trucks were coming down the street.
Yeah, we found out the hard way. Yeah, anything that would normally come down Center Street and North Street was coming down Pine Street. Right, exactly right. And as far as motor vehicle crashes, we have a few that, especially during snow, ice, and whatnot, because there's very little room for error. The road's here, the tree's there. You mess up, you're going to find the tree, you're going to find the telephone pole, you're going to find the stone wall, no question about that. But the other thing is that because of, as has been brought out, that's a great road for bicycling. And I mentioned, Richard and I were talking about that today, that it's in a couple of books, because it's pretty, it's scenic, it's nice, and whatnot. And yes, you get 1, 2, 5, 10 groups of them. I think Saturday morning is one of the big ones that just, they're sailing down the road, and we've had bicyclists hit, clipped, and knocked off their bikes. No question about that down there at all.
The worst is when you give them a little friendly toot so they know you're coming up behind them and then they start giving you the finger and yelling at you.
Right, yes, yeah. There is, I go to some of these meetings with the cyclists and the motorists, and it gets pretty intense sometimes because, yes, there's a lot of angst, and you think you're just letting them know that you're there, just as if you're walking down a bike path. They're supposed to give a little ring on the bike or pass it on your left or something like that so you know they're there, and it's thank you, but very often, as you state, when you do what you think is a friendly little toot, it ends up with an unfriendly little gesture back. I've been the recipient of that. And then as far as the enforcement, yeah, absolutely. Ken, you're right. Yep, we can do that. So we'll put that on the list. But I'd be willing to, you know, especially the folks who live in Pine Street, if you know of a little clear spot that we might be able to get something, the solar panel is probably about the size of the seat cushion. That's what I need, view to the sun. Just like the one down on Robert Sproul Road, the pedestrian crosswalk, that's the size of the panel. That's what I need, excuse me, up to the sky. So.
Run an extension cord from our barn, Chief.
Yeah, no, there's innovative ways to do this. Yep.
A couple of trees to take down.
Yep.
None of that. No, can't take no trees, can't take the trees down.
Wow, we're really getting sensitive now. But you're right, if it were like near a telephone pole and we could talk to NSTAR and maybe put the charging panel up on top of the,
Running an extension cord down the driveway.
yeah. That'd be very generous of you. But yeah, there's some things that we can probably actually do that might help a little bit, but I think the general gist is probably right now, we're not going to be able to look at widening Pine Street, but we got to look at mitigating some of the circumstances down there to make folks feel a little bit more comfortable, that they can go up and down the road. And truth be known, if two SUVs meet in the dark, someone's going to have, you're both going to have to give way a little bit because some places just not the room, especially with the turn by the farm with a huge ledge out there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a narrow road, no two ways about it.
Or is that what, Medfield with that?
Oh, okay, I was thinking back a little bit where the,
Where the horse farm, the farm was
right,
originally.
yeah, the horse
had
farm.
the first
right,
curve.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I have a piece of property that has sunlight, so I'll take you up on the offer and I'll give you my contact information afterwards and a telephone pole right there with full sun.
Okay.
So first and foremost. Now, if we did put in a one of those speed trackers, says, speed limit 30 miles an hour, and we're tracking, how much data does that provide back to the police department to say, wow, people are flying all day long up and down Pine Street, specifically during commute time, specifically when kids are being picked up by the buses? I live on a straightaway, so I see it all the time.
Those solar speed signs can also collect data because there's a small radar unit that's in the sign, and you can actually even do it nowadays over the cell phone. And you can just do a data dump over the cell phone if you have any reception up in that part of Pine Street, because I know you may not, depending on which carrier you have. But you can get info, and we'll track it half hour, hour, how many vehicles, how many axles, what speed, what direction. Yes, you can gather that data, absolutely.
I'm just wondering if that would increase the number of patrols that you and your team, are running either off of Quail, I'm only speaking from my section,
Yep.
or from Quail and Snow Hill.
Well, what it does is sometimes we think we know when we ought to run radar, but when you look at the printed out, because I've got a small speed tracker that I put across the road sometimes, you find out that, no, that's not the right time to be there. There's a specific time to be there. And you can actually see that because it will tell you and highlight it with colors when the high speed times are. So yeah, absolutely, that's all out of that same device.
Very good. No, just wondering, because I think the responsibility that Mr. Sullivan had mentioned about people driving responsibly on their street, I think for the residents of Pine Street, I think that's a known fact that we maintain probably 25, 30. We can tell who's a resident and who isn't a resident, as opposed to people commuting through Dover and back and forth, and specifically at those times of rush hour.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yep. You might be by the big rock, huh?
Hi there, Anna Mayo Shaybrook over at 111 Pine Street. I'm the farmhouse closest to the road where it says dangerous curve. And I suppose what I would love to see, I hear the point where too many signs that people stop registering. However, between my house, the greenhouse, the Griffer house, I suppose the Ellison's kids are too old now. Between our three houses at that dangerous curve, there are 10 kids. I mean, we knew it going into buying our house. However, I would love to see a sign, watch out for children or things like that, because our kids actually sometimes ride their bikes to school. Our she's not yet 7, but our 6-year-old, we've taken him on Pine Street. I know it sounds ludicrous, but we have to live and we have to teach our children, how to ride their bikes safely and coexist with Pine Street. And I think they're growing up to be a little street savvy living on Pine Street, but I would just love to see watch for children kind of a thing, as well as the solar thing, which I think would be wonderful. So that's
Bill Scannell from Pine Street. There is a sign that says something to the effect of drive like you lived here, or your children lived here. And that one hits home with me every time I see it, so that's one you can put on your own property, and I think it's probably more effective than any sign that's going to hang, on the side of a road.
When you were talking, I was thinking, okay, what do we do? Another sign, and that's the one I thought of. But you make it small enough so it fits in the sign, so it doesn't, look hard in the neighborhood. But you pop it up there, so instead of, being the one on the side of the road, it's, one that's up in the air that can stay there all year long, and maybe it nails a little bit more at home that there are children and they belong to somebody, and remember that, please. Got it. Yep, got that written down.
Beth Bauman from Pine Street. In Europe, they have speed signs with the radar in them that they actually take a picture of your driver's, of the car's license plate if you're speeding, and mail you a ticket. Can we do that here?
Sure.
Pine Street?
Yeah. Ixnay.
It would be a great thing to do, but Massachusetts is so far away from that. It's not even worth having the discussion. We've had the discussion a few times, and it comes down to are you just trying to make money? Some states do it. Some states do it with private contractors, and they get very aggressive about it because the way they get paid is a cut of the fines, so it gets a little bit crazy. But we tried it in Massachusetts a couple of times, and one of the things I do for the Mass Chiefs Association, I'm the chair of the Highway and Traffic Safety, so that has been about as good as pushing an elephant out of a plane. It just doesn't fly, literally. It's so far from potentiality in Massachusetts that I will probably not live to see it. Realistically, not being sarcastic, it just doesn't. Not with our legislature.
I just have a sort of redirect because I've been thinking about this, and something that Beth just said reminded me. I hear what Mr. Feeney is saying, and I understand about the drainage and the ice and so on, but I know the stories that the police will tell you that when they put out radar traps, it's usually the residents that they catch. The residents get really angry, and I'm trying to avoid that. I want to reissue. I can't believe that I'm arguing in favor or speaking in favor of speed bumps, and there are people who would die laughing hearing that, but I am. But what Beth said, in Europe, I've seen speed bumps that do not go the full width of the road. It's a geometric shape that's in the middle of the road, and there's probably 3 feet on each side of it. It just is in the middle, but you can't get around it. You have to go, one side of your car is going to go over it. If we did that, it wouldn't interfere with the drainage because it would be away from the gutters. And I would suggest that it's worth looking at the setup in Westwood because we can learn from them. They've used several different designs. Dover used the raised crosswalks. One of my friends lives on the street in Westwood that we're talking about, has a speed bump right in front of his house. I've been standing in his driveway talking to him, and I've seen a lot of trucks go by, including some of the landscape trucks, and I haven't heard them hit it. They do slow down, but they haven't hit it. So it's possible that there may be refinements in speed bump design that we could look at that might avoid some of the concerns about the icing and the danger to the road. Just worth learning from other towns.
Just to sort of summarize and to try to figure out what we're going to do next, because we're not going to solve this tonight, obviously. Thank you for bringing up this issue. One of my goals is to have connectors from all the neighborhoods so that all the kids can get downtown safely. Whether that's a sidewalk or a trail through the woods. I think that the town should be planning that sort of thing and providing that to every neighborhood so that we don't have these misses with the children. I know that when I bike on single file on Pine Street, I don't see many pedestrians ordinarily. And so I don't know how much of a pedestrian, and I don't live in that neighborhood, so I don't know how much of a pedestrian thoroughfare it is and how much of an issue a sidewalk is. But I guess what I would suggest is that if people are interested in this issue that live in that neighborhood, and clearly you're interested because there's so many of you here, ordinarily we don't get this many people. Ordinarily we don't have anybody at our meetings. So what I would suggest is that maybe we see if people are willing to continue talking and to pursue solutions with Ken and the chief and see if we can come up with things that can make things work better for the Pine Street neighborhood. So that would be my suggestion. Does that seem reasonable to you guys?
It does, yeah.
If you would be willing to sort of organize that and just let your neighbors know and coordinate it with Ken and the superintendent and the chief and then let us know what the town might be able to do.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It's been a long discussion, and maybe we need a little joke, so I was thinking, sitting here, maybe the solution is not to repair the potholes.
Our next item is an action items, vote to award the joint salt bid as recommended by Superintendent Feeney. Do we have, and it's, I don't know why we have two prices, Ken, but we've got two prices. I guess one's a backup price or something, or one's for sea salt or something, and one's for...
Yeah, basically, there's 2 different types of salt that we bid, along with 26 other towns. We are the host community for it.
Yeah.
And the first type of salt is rock salt.
Yeah.
That's the salt that comes out of the mines.
Yeah.
The second type of salt is solar salt. There is a difference. Solar salt reacts faster to the storm, and rock salt has a longer residual. So there is two types of salt. You'll see different towns awarding to, different, what they prefer to use. Me, I don't have a preference. I just want to make sure I've got salt. So I think that's why we're recommending a CC salt bid award
Yeah.
and a rock salt. But we will go to the low bidder,
Yeah.
90% of the time, unless we can't get salt.
Okay.
But they won't deliver it to me if I don't give them some kind of an award notice.
Great.
So that's what we're trying to do.
Is there a difference or an advantage or disadvantage to either type of salt using in the?
It's all preference. It's an ice storm, maybe solar would be better, because it goes fast. Or in an ice storm, of course, we can spruce it up with calcium to go after the ice. So, we've got calcium wetting, so we can do it, and that's what we had to do last year, because it was very, very cold last year. Salt starts losing its ability to melt ice and snow at 20 degrees. And from below there, it goes down pretty rapidly. So the calcium is important to activate the salt on the roads during cold weather.
Am I wrong, or did the salt bid price go down this year?
No, it didn't. It's up. It's up a little bit, but not much.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
thought
not to be mistaken with asphalt. I never thought I'd see asphalt prices equal to salt. It's crazy. Salt's very expensive.
Do you want
Mr. Thompson?
I'll give you, just listening to Ken there, I'll give you just the quick primer on salt. There's three basic types, and you mentioned one, the calcium chloride, potassium chloride, and sodium chloride. And calcium chloride is probably the most environmental friendly, least damaging to the environment. Potassium chloride is sylvite. That's a little more expensive and harder to come by. And then sodium chloride is rock salt. And sodium chloride would be the chemical that, if it gets into your water supplies, has links to hypertension and so forth because of the sodium content. So environmentally, rock salt is the worst, but there's also these temperatures at which they work better at. And Ken, those mixtures, you lower the freezing temperature by creating a mixture, so the temperature at which water freezes goes down every time you add a mixture, and the different chemicals have different freezing points. And so calcium chloride might only work down to a certain temperature, and then you have to switch to sodium chloride. And so there's a whole management, and you probably have tables and lookups for that sort of thing. But sodium chloride would be the most harmful to the environment and to water supplies, simply because of the hypertension, blood pressure. You don't want high sodium.
And aren't there other treatments that people use to pre-treat for, like, beet juice or something of that sort? There are all sorts of different things that you spread
there's a
to
whole
make
number
things
of
work
them. Yeah,
better.
beer is another one, surplus, whatever the, there's a lot of them out there right now. But the standards, the cheapest ones are the ones that we use now. An example in the consortium, the town of Medfield uses less salt than any of the other 26-member towns. And there are some smaller towns. So some of them lay it on pretty heavy. Some of them lay it on really heavy. And their tonnages is, town of Medfield, we'll order 1,000 tons of salt this year. And that's a lot of salt. But these other towns, 6,000 tons, 8,000 tons, 5,000, 4,000 tons, some of them do have more road miles than us, but, there are some that have less that use more. So
One of the
we're very
byproducts,
conservative with it.
the calcium chloride. Have you ever driven down on the Cape or places where you're going through water supply areas and they use a lot of calcium chloride? It makes your car turn white. That's the calcium component that spreads that white dust. It's not harmful. It's just you have to run your car through the car wash a little bit more.
Well, is your bid the calcium or the?
No, the calcium, we don't consume enough calcium in a year to make it eligible for a bid. So what we do is we just do the two salts. That's all we do.
So it's the sodium or the rock salt?
Yep. It's the solar salt or rock salt. That's two types of sodium chloride.
And
One is made on a beach, okay, and the other is mined.
and that
One-
environmentally is not good.
If you use it sort of according to the package directions, it's okay. If you overdose things with it, then, you know, the excess is going to go either into the groundwater or into surface water. And, you know, where we have our water supplies or you're on wells, you don't want a lot of sodium in your raw water supply, and that's regulated as well.
Yeah.
So,
From the Salt Institute, I had a great book that, you know, we used to have to report how much sodium in drinking water. We don't report that any longer. But it was a good book because it was like a slice of white bread, 9 milligrams of salt. You know, and forget it on Campbell's soup. I don't even like it was. I forget how much it was. It was just incredible, you know. But people that are on low sodium diets are eating this stuff every day, and so I think it came to the point was, well, we actually had one town ban salt, and there was a fatality. Unfortunately, it was I think it was one of the members of the board that lost his son, banning salt in the town, use of it. So it's necessary. You know, it's I guess a necessary evil. But we don't use much. We are very conscious of it because we have groundwater supply here, and the 20 milligrams we used to conform on our raw water, not our treated water. So, but the book was a great book because it just had a diet of how much sodium in every product that people consume every day, and the conclusion was from DEP that the people that are on low sodium diets ought to watch their diet. So that's where it, you know, that's why it's now not even listed. We don't test for it. Yeah. So that's where it's at.
So do we have a motion to recommend, to award the joint salt bid as recommended by Superintendent Feeney?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Licenses and permits. Harding Estate Neighborhood requests permission to hold a block party in the area of Evergreen Way and Spring Valley Road, Sunday, October 5, 4 to 8 p.m.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Boy Scout Troop 89 requests permission to post a sign at the transfer station announcing their annual Christmas tree pickup and recycling program. This is their 19th year.
And I so move.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Medfield Youth Soccer requests permission to place signs September 28th to October 12th advertising the 3-on-3 soccer tournament.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Pending, vote to sign water tower contract. That's what this stack is. And to sign environmental partners amendment.
Yes, you've already voted to award these contracts, so what you're doing is signing them tonight. And there are tabs telling you where to sign. I believe the blue one, you only have to sign one of the tabs. The other one, Ken or myself can sign. That's the notice to proceed.
Okay.
But you need to sign that. And then there's an amendment to the environmental partners contract for construction supervision phase. They water and sewer originally contracted with them for the design phase. And now that the water tower is about to be built, we need to sign an amendment to the contract covering construction.
Excellent. Good.
What, Mike, what's the timing on the start of construction, completion of construction, approximately on the water tower?
On the water tower, you need to sign it tonight.
No, not the signing, but when are they going to start building it? When are they going to be finished?
They said they expect it will take about a month to start up, to mobilize.
And then how long
get
to
their
finish,
bonds
do you
in
think?
place and get the trailers up there or whatever they're going to do. Because where are they out of Georgia, Ken, or Tennessee or something? Or Kentucky, yeah. I knew they were not out of Phoenix, but so it'll take them some time to mobilize. And then they've asked in the contract, I believe, it provided 360 days for completion.
What they're trying to do is get the foundation in this year, and then we'll just let it cure up.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Good.
The big problem with the water tower is going to be removal of contaminated soil around the old tower, and that's still being worked on
Oh, I
by
thought we had a
Chris and
solution to
others.
that.
The what?
I thought we had a solution to that with DECAM.
we did, but we may no longer
It
have.
was never, it was always that they would entertain the issue. It was never a solution.
Okay.
It was our proposed solution. Whether it's accepted or not is a different question.
That's true.
So-
It was our solution. It may not have been their solution.
Have they nixed it entirely at this point, or is it still
I
being
think we're
worked?
probably pretty much there. That they're not taking it.
Oh, that they're not gonna do it.
So if I look at your figures right, we're talking somewhere around the end of 2015?
Yeah, they're hoping to have it online by the end of 2015. That would, now the main will be completed well before that. In fact, they're probably, I'd say, Ken, about 2/3 through the main, or 60%. So they will, and that can go online except for the portion out to the water tower and the portion out to Long Meadow, but that can go online once it's completed, chlorinated, and tested. So
What's an estimate on that as far as the main?
probably, I would say this fall. You know, the biggest problem is going to be going under the railroad tracks. They've already done most of Long Meadow. There's 500 feet there. They're down to the railroad tracks, and it'll take about 2 weeks to go under the railroad tracks once they get permission to do that, and then they just have to go out to 27, and that will be done. But
there's nothing
Within a month or so?
if they can, if they can get permission to CSX and get a starting date, yeah.
But once they finish it, there's nothing to connect to until the water tower is built, so that there's really...
No, it's going to connect to the water main down on Harding Street.
Oh, so it'll, all right.
So
give us
that
some-
phase of it can, they can just block off the portion that goes to the water tower, but run the water down.
Okay.
So you should see an improvement when you take a shower or flush the toilet in your neighborhood, I would think.
Pressure's always been huge at my house. So do we have a motion to vote to sign the water tower contract and vote to sign the environmental partners amendment?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Discuss the Sudbury Senior Tax Program.
Yes, I met with Ed Beard and Stan Bergeron from the assessor's office
good,
this
thank you.
week, and you asked them to get some information on the Sudbury Senior Tax Program, and they've been doing a lot of research on that. They've been in touch several times with the Sudbury assessor's office. They've been collecting information. It's a very complicated program. It appears basically that the only town using it right now in the state is the town of Sudbury, and it's a 3-year test period that the state is using to see how it works. They're using Sudbury as a pilot test case. Before they would let any other communities institute a similar program, they want to see how the test goes with Sudbury. But the assessors are trying to understand the program and to come up with recommendations that might make the program more suitable for Medfield. And it's been quite complicated. It took Sudbury a couple of years to come up with a solution to how to implement it. But they will then want to meet with you and explain how they feel the program might be workable if the town decides that's how it wants to go in, and explain the complexities. For example, the money that is saved on the tax bills of the seniors who qualify has to be picked up by the rest of the householders in town. So it's cost shifting, so you have to be careful how you implement the program so you don't cost shift too much. What the qualifications are there income guidelines, are there asset guidelines, all of those things that come into play. So
And
they
they're-
are hard at work on it.
And Sudbury's probably only a year or so into it, so that...
Sudbury's in the second year of the program right now, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks for looking into that, Mike. Selectmen's reports, I think what I'll do is, because it's getting late, we'll just, and typically we haven't been doing those on the third meeting of the month, so why don't we just put that stuff over till our next meeting? Is that okay, guys?
Sure. That's fine with me, sure.
Informational items, anything there, Mike, or Chris, or Evelyn, that
Yeah,
you guys want to report on?
Ron, I don't know if you got one of the brochures. He put together quite a comprehensive brochure. He
Chock-a-block
passed
full of information.
Yes, it really is, yeah. He did a nice job on it.
He did.
Norfolk County Mosquito Control Water Management Permit. They have a map in there that shows the area that they're going to be clearing out, and I believe they're gonna do it this week, so they wanted to get in right away. I checked with the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission says mosquito control is not subject to the wetlands regulations, so they can go ahead without that. But I think it's a good project. We've always worked very well. I think they've been in touch with Ken about taking the excavated material to our transfer station, putting it in the brush pile, so. And with the problem with mosquito breeding, I think it's important that we give them permission to go ahead and do this. So I've signed off on the permit, but I put it on for your information.
And this is up in the Hospital Road area?
Yeah, if you have the thing there, Pete, in the older.
It's between the two softball fields. There's a
little
stream that runs down between the two softball fields. And so it's just off of the edge of the outfields, the two
I
outfields.
believe they're also going to remove debris for the remainder of the brook, so they'll.
It sounds like the water's just ponding there a little bit, more than they want.
Before the beavers build a dam.
So is that something about beaver dams? Do we need to?
Yeah, there is the beavers are back. We've had Barry Mandel got a 10-day permit, and he's setting his traps out.
Which part of town, Mike?
Down along the Stop River.
Okay.
Ken, did he talk to you guys about cleaning out the culverts under the causeway? You did, okay.
They're starting to build it again.
Yeah. If it's a road block, where they block a culvert under roadway, highway can go in and remove them. Other than that, you need permission from the Conservation Commission and the Board of Health and that. So they cleaned out the culverts. They had them about half blocked, I think, under.
Oh, yeah, they do a good job.
Yeah. And then Barry was, in addition to setting out the traps, he was going to try to lower some of the dams that they were building. The problem is they built several of the dams in the Stop River area and some of the tributaries in Nantasket Brook, and they just keep going at it. They're tough critters to keep up with.
So with that permit, he's out trying to trap them now as well as break up the dams?
The problem is the permit's only good for 10 days. And I think you can only get 2 permits, and the third one the state has to give you permission. The good part is the trapping season begins, I think, mid-October. So during the trapping season, he can trap without a permit.
Oh, good.
And that goes, I think, until around, is it May 1st, Ken? But it's a pretty good season when you can trap without getting a permit. But it is tough you have to go through the Conservation Commission, you have to go through the Board of Health. You're only allowed to get 2 10-day permits if you're not in the trapping season, and it makes it very difficult to try to keep up with the problem.
And it's expensive well, not hugely expensive, but it's a cost for the town to.
Yes, yeah, I think last year it cost us about $5,000, so.
And there was a time back before we banned those leg hold traps as a state. As a citizen referendum petition, this all was just taken care of by the trappers. But now the trappers don't exist, and so we have to pay people to do it, so.
Yeah, and apparently beaver skin coats have fallen out of favor with the fashion market too, so that's another problem.
Barry says that I think you can sell a pelt for maybe $10 or something at best. So are we all set then?
Before we get into that, can we invite John Thompson to the meeting, since there are several key elements here relating to the environment and remediation?
That's fine with me. Is that okay with the?
Fine.
The Medfield Board of Selectmen needs to meet in executive closed session for the following purposes: to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate. I declare that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. The open session will not reconvene at the conclusion of the executive session.
I move that the Medfield Board of Selectmen go into executive session.